So thank you so much for your interest in this panel. We're super excited to talk to you today. So I am Lauren Hamilton. I am the Ambassador and University Partnership Associate at the Green Program. At the Green Program, we strive to empower and educate future sustainability leaders through our short-term education abroad programs that are all focused on sustainable development. So a lot of you on the call might be TGP alumni, as well as our panelists who are alumni as well. Maybe you're an interested TGP student, or maybe you just heard about this panel from your professor or family member. Regardless, we're super happy that you're here. We've traveled with over 3,200 students, young professionals, and just passionate people who are really striving to become global engaged citizens. This week and yesterday was the 50th anniversary of Earth Day, which is a big milestone. And so this week, TGP is committed to a theme of mobilizing for change. And each of these panels is talking about, how different industries are, mobilizing for change for sustainability and what that looks like. And this theme actually aligns really well with Earth Day's global theme, which is climate action. So we'll talk a little later about how all of our panelists are taking action, and we'd love to hear how you're taking action for the environment as well. So some of you are probably very, knowledgeable about what Earth Day is, and maybe didn't know that it was the 50th anniversary, but Earth Day was really a unified response to an environmental crisis at the time, 50 years ago, from oil spills, smog, rivers that were so polluted that were catching on fire. And the first Earth Day was really accredited to launching, some of the largest modern environmental movements, and is now recognized as one of the largest public, civic engagement events. So we're really happy to be celebrating this with you all. I know that we're all probably sitting at home wanting to find ourselves mobilizing and having action. And so we hope that, in this session, you're able to gain some clarity and some understanding of what's going on in the world of sustainability, specifically in consulting, right in this session. And yeah, we would love to engage with you as well on the topic. So a few housekeeping items before we introduce our panelists. If you've ever used Zoom before, there is a chat feature where my colleague Jess is going to be manning the chat bar. She really wants to hear from you. So please tell us who you are, where you're tuning in from, maybe what makes you want to mobilize for the environment. As well as I'm going to encourage everybody to, really respond to the questions that I've, posed to the panelists. I would love to hear your feedback as well. And I'm sure all the other participants on this call would love to hear everyone's thoughts on these topics. So if you have any thoughts, definitely add them in there. We'll also be doing a Q&A at the end of the session, and I'll try to be integrating your questions throughout the panel discussion as well. So definitely be, typing in those questions. We're excited to hear from you. And we'll also be shooting out some polls throughout this intro, just to learn more about who you are, how you heard about this panel. So please do respond, and we'd love to hear from you. So I think one just launched right now, so get on there and respond. But without further ado, I'm gonna just introduce our panelists. So starting off, Hannah, can you just tell us who you are, where you're tuning in from, and a little bit about your background?
Yeah, absolutely. So I did the Green program in Iceland in 2015. It was super life-changing, definitely got me where I wanted to go, kind of showed me the skills I needed to have. So it's an awesome program. I did it while I was at Baylor, where I studied environmental studies, and then I did my master's in renewable and sustainable energy at CU Boulder with the Masters of the Environment program. Right now, I am a solar and energy storage consultant for Independent Power Systems. We're based in Boulder, Colorado, but I do all of my work for the Northeast for energy storage projects and solar projects out there. We also do projects worldwide, and I do a few projects in Colorado here and there.
Awesome. Thanks, Hannah. Lucas, do you want to go ahead?
Sure. Hi, everyone. My name is Lucas Beslow. I started with the Green program in 2015 on the Peru trip, and then went to the Thailand alumni reunion, which was great. And the Green program trips really helped me at a time when I was looking for work coming out of college. I was starting to kind of fade into taking the easiest job I could find, or kind of the job that was offered to me. And the green program really helped focus me on making sure I stayed in the renewable or green space, really. So it's very useful to me for that. I got my undergraduate degree in environmental engineering from Purdue. And straight from there, I went into the environmental consulting world at a company called Haley & Aldrich in Cleveland, Ohio. And there I did remediation work, which was basically removing pollutants from soils and groundwater and things like that. It was really grueling work, and it wasn't as technical as I wanted it to be. So I looked around in the industry elsewhere, and that's where I found ERM, where I worked in Houston on their air quality and climate change team. And there I was doing air permitting and emissions calculations and things like that for my clients. Circumstances required, I came back home to Chicago at the time. And so I found a position in the ERM office in our information solutions work, which was basically environmental health and safety software consulting for our clients. Overall, after about 3 years, I felt pretty unfulfilled in my career in consulting. And so I decided to return back to school. And right now I'm at UC Davis studying energy systems for my master's.
Awesome. Thanks, Lucas. Sean, last but not least.
So I'm Sean. I am currently a sustainability consultant at Arup in Boston. I did the green program in May of 2017 in Iceland, which was a really awesome experience for me. And I got into sustainability consulting kind of by accident and just kind of fell into it, but found it to be a really awesome place. So I studied energy engineering at Penn State, but have a lot of different passions within sustainability. So it really gave me an opportunity to not just focus on one area, but be involved in the broader range of topics that I was passionate about.
Awesome. Thanks so much, Sean. And I just want to do a quick reminder to the audience, definitely introduce yourselves and add your questions in as we go along. But we're going to start with some of our questions for the panelists. And first, I think that the consulting field and sustainability consulting can seem like a very broad concept, and it's like, what does that really mean? So I'd love to hear, what sustainability consultants mean in your specific work, and any like educational or professional background that helps to become a sustainability consultant. And Sean, will you start off there with that? Because I know that your role specifically is sustainability consultant.
Yeah, exactly. So it's a very, very broad background of people that can get into sustainability consulting. So I work mostly in the built environment, so buildings, a little bit of like master planning, transit, stuff like that. Like I said, I studied energy engineering, but there's people on my team who are civil engineers, architects, mechanical engineers, and then there's the other side of things, which are more policy driven. The variety of backgrounds is pretty extensive, and that's kind of how things are going, where everyone is somewhat of a sustainability like engineer at this point, because it has to be taken into account for just about any field.
Got it. Great. And what does like a day in the life of your role look like, Sean?
So I do a lot of different areas. So there's a lot of rating systems which get involved with sustainability. So things like LEED, Passive House, Living Building Challenge are just a few. So I do a little bit of work in there, and then also more energy modeling. So for building energy usage, consumption, stuff like that. And then another completely different range of things. We do material health, and the just overall sourcing of materials is another thing. So I wear a lot of hats in a lot of different places that I have to do work in.
Got it. Cool. Hannah, what about you? What does, your role look like? And I know that you guys are working specifically on solar and storage, but can you talk a little bit more about your role and, how you got into it, and maybe what a day in a life looks like?
Yeah, absolutely. So I kind of majored in being a hippie in undergrad. I didn't really know what I wanted to do. I thought I wanted to go to law school. I thought I wanted to do this, that. I couldn't really side. So when I went to the green program, I found out that I just loved learning about the technology, and kind of found myself wanting to do engineering, but I was already a junior in college, so I couldn't really, switch tracks there. So that's why I got my master's in renewable energy. And then I still didn't really know how I wanted to really create the most impact with the background that I had. So I kind of just found myself in the solar role, because it's really, like, as a consultant for solar, it's so all encompassing. And my approach to my education was I really took all kinds of classes, MBA classes, and engineering classes, finance classes, just everything that I could, because energy is just so, it's everything. It's in everything. It's really far reaching. So that's kind of, I use everything that I've learned in my day-to-day work. I design the systems for my clients. I consult with them, like, with what they are and aren't looking for. I have to get creative pretty often to kind of discuss their system with them and help it make sense to them as an investment, because in all honesty, no one spends $1 million on a project just because it's good for the world and the environment. It has to really make sense for them on a lot of different levels. So I have to understand financials behind it. So I run financial analyses for them, cash flow analyses. And then I do a lot of modeling with if they're doing any kind of demand response programs with their battery systems, or anything like that. All kinds of modeling for the systems. But the majority of my work is just working with clients to just help them understand their system and help it make sense for them.
Awesome. Thanks, Hannah. Lucas, can you tell us a little bit more about what, your role looked like at ERM and the other consultant agency that you worked at? You talked a little bit about it, I think, with like the remediation work and stuff like that, but can you go a little bit into further detail?
Sure. So I guess I'll go chronologically. So at Haley and Aldrich in Cleveland, when I was doing remediation work, that was a lot of working outside. It was a lot of, I was often overseeing like demolitions and things like that, or pollutant removal and things like that. So it was a lot of oversight working on construction sites and things like that. On top of that, it was a lot of groundwater sampling, air sampling. It was kind of nitty gritty work, basically. I was outside all day. So it was definitely an interesting time. When I went to ERM in Houston on the air quality team, that was mostly desk work, on Excel all day, calculating air emissions and things like that. And then when I was in Chicago on our information solutions team, that looked like talking with clients a lot over the phone and more Excel work, a lot of Excel work, and kind of managing database systems and things like that. So yeah, a sustainability consultant is obviously, as everyone said, it's an extremely broad term, basically, and it can take on a lot of different forms. I'd say what's important to have as your background is you definitely have to have a passion for it, and it's very good to be kind of a jack of all trades and get your education in a lot of different places, as Hannah kind of alluded to.
Yeah, definitely. That makes sense. And, I think that depending on the work that you're doing, sometimes the projects that you're working on can be short-term, right? Like you're installing a solar project with the company, and then it is installed, and you can correct me if I'm wrong, Hannah. And then maybe that project is completed. And then Sean, maybe the similar type of short-term projects. How do you feel the impact of your projects on a local, global, regional scale, whatever makes sense for those certain types of projects? And how does your organization measure impact with short-term projects? Hannah, do you want to maybe touch on this first?
Yeah, so it's funny that you say short-term, because we always talk about how commercial projects and any kind of construction in general it's just so long to get off
True.
Like but projects that last years, especially working with architects sometimes because those start from the very beginning. But the way I see it, I got into solar because I felt like that's how I could make the most impact with the stuff that I know. And I look at it as like the larger systems I'm able to have, the more resilient I'm able to make my clients. That's impact to me. And so, even really small systems are very impactful to me. But I think the most impact I can have is to work with someone who maybe doesn't care about the environment at all. Like I've had people tell me in the first meeting they don't believe in climate change, and I'm like, that's completely irrelevant to this conversation. But they just really need to tell me that because they're talking to a solar person. So they, those are the people that I really want to convert and convince that it can make sense for everyone. And, crossing those kind of lines and making solar make sense for everyone, that is what I believe has the most impact in my field, because those are the people who might not have done it if they hadn't talked to me.
Yeah, that makes sense. I think I'd love to, we'll talk a little bit about more of that in future questions, just maybe what that interaction is like when someone is maybe not coming from the same value systems as you or your company, and what that, how that can feel and how rewarding that is when you actually change them into being a believer in it, or at least investing in a product. Right. But Sean, what about you guys? How are you guys measuring impact at Arup, and maybe on your different project scales?
So measuring impact is a little bit different so it's for the building sector, it's a little bit easier of like an actual number. You could just say, like EUI, for example, energy use intensity. If you're monitoring your EUIs on your buildings, seeing that they're going down, you're showing that you're designing better buildings, more efficient buildings. And then matching that with emissions. It's harder to kind of put a number on exactly like it's hard to compare those sometimes though, because they don't fit into the same categories. But if something like a policy that like we've been working on, so that'll be a short term, like 1 year project, but then you're actually seeing the impact come much further after that. So you do the work and it's over quick, but then maybe it's a 2050 outlook that your impact in that span of things is much greater than like your quick turnaround seemed to be.
Yeah, that makes sense. Lucas, I know that in our conversations, we talked a little bit more just about, your feelings of like personal impact, of how you wanted to create impact through your career. And I kind of wanted that to be a good segue to our next question of just, talking about what were some of the more challenging like clients and projects that you worked on in your role, and maybe what were some of the more fun and rewarding ones. Maybe they're one and the same, but if you can maybe talk a little bit about that too with your experience, that'd be great.
Sure. Well, yeah, they probably are one and the same. My first big project out of college was basically what we had to do was dig up people's yards and playgrounds and things like that. They had been backfilled with fly ash from coal power plants, and basically that's full of arsenic and heavy leads, and there's kids playing in the dirt and stuff like that. So that work was long days, like physically digging in the dirt. Again, pretty grueling work, but at the end of it, I come back to the site a year later and it's green fields and there's kids playing the playground and things like that. So that was a really great impact to see. In general, I would say my struggles with consulting, things that I've struggled with in general, would be how much your time is in demand. Basically, you need to make sure that you're moving from project to project as quickly as possible, and your level of billability, so to speak, is a lot of times how you're measured. And that was a struggle for me, and definitely something I think someone should anticipate, is that their hours are definitely measured, and it's important that they stay. If they're out of work or things like that, it can be a stressful time. So that's something that I struggled with.
Yeah, totally valid. Sean, do you have any other thoughts on, or have any insight on some challenging projects that you worked on and maybe some of the most fun and rewarding?
Yeah. So it's kind of a different take than you would expect, is like working with a client who's really well informed. So someone who knows so much about what you're trying to do, that it's a challenging thing because you have to prove everything to them, but in the same time, like, you're furthering your own knowledge because you have to be so sure about what you're doing before you hand it over to them. So and then obviously on the flip side is a client who just, like you were saying before, Hannah, who doesn't care about the environment or anything. They're just maybe doing something for a plaque or something like that. So it's fun and invigorating to work with like a client who knows a lot, but it also, on the other side, if they don't know anything, it's a really cool opportunity to see them come over and start to think about things environmentally conscious if they hadn't done that before.
Yeah, definitely. Hannah, what about you?
Yeah, so I love that you said that, Sean, because I definitely see that in my own work. One thing that I really enjoy doing is doing just a ton of research for my clients, to see, like, get into their heads and their world, to understand why something like an investment in solar or batteries would make sense for them. And one great example is like multi-tenant building owners. So that's really a code that we've cracked at IPS. It used to be really hard to sell to anyone who owns an apartment building or commercial multi-tenant space, because there's an issue with splitting the incentives. So building owners are not going to just pass along all the great benefits of solar to their tenants without getting paid for it. It's just not going to happen. So what we've kind of figured out and seen our clients get creative with are creative ways, like legally with leases, or there's this thing called a green lease where they can split the benefits of solar. It's called the split incentive, where they split the financial benefits of solar and bake it into their lease, or just find creative ways of doing that where now solar can make sense for multi-tenant building owners. And that has been huge in our business the past 2 or 3 years. There's just a lot of ways to really make it financially pencil very quickly for those types of building owners. So those have been really fun to watch.
Cool, great. And I think this is a nice segue, and we've touched on this a little bit in this conversation of just like what types of clients you're working with, and what their background or values are around sustainability in the environment. And I like to talk a little bit more. I know, Hannah, we talked about this in our conversation of just like how policies will impact your work and how it's important to be up to date on policies of different regions and states that you're working in. And Sean, we talked about a project in Massachusetts that you were excited about. So, can you guys talk a little bit more on how, state and federal policies do impact consulting work, and how that can be, integrated into the way that you approach clients? Hannah, I kind of pose this to you first, so we can go.
Yeah. So I work in multiple states, so I see that play out every day. And Massachusetts is so ahead of the game in terms of energy policy. One really great program they have is called the SMART program. And they've just doubled it recently because of COVID. So that's really awesome news. But what they do is they incentivize solar. They send you a check every month basically for going solar, whether you're a homeowner or a business owner. And it's a pretty sizable check. Like, it's a lot of money. But the utility isn't doing it for free. They're not just handing it out. They found a way to profit from this program as well. So the utilities in Massachusetts have just come up with tons of creative ways to not only get Massachusetts closer to its climate goals, but also profit off of solar while their customers are profiting off of solar. And energy storage. They're one of the first states to have energy storage programs. And just the way I see that play out is the projects that I work on in Massachusetts can have like 3-year returns. So in 3 years, they'll completely break even and be cash flow positive by year 4. But in Colorado, it takes much longer for a solar investment to pay off, and even longer for a battery investment. A solar project can take like plus years for a commercial project in Colorado. And then with energy storage, it just energy in Colorado. But tons of reasons to get energy because they're all extremely complicated and hard to communicate with customers. But they're so innovative and they're only going to get us closer to reaching our climate goals.
Great. Yeah, Sean, do you have any other thoughts on this since you guys are in Boston?
Yeah, kind of the opposite thing is opposite of incentives is fines. So we had a project that was influenced by New York passing local law 97, which capped greenhouse gas emissions from their commercial buildings. So in Boston, they saw that as kind of a warning that that's to come. If New York did it, that's going to happen in Boston at some point. So one of our projects that was in design phase right now, they took that and wanted to see that impact would have if the same law was passed in Boston. So that kind of gave them their different options of just going to straight electrify everything, or maybe purchase, do power purchase agreements or things like that. So it gave them, by being aware of different policies happening, it gave them a better insight to what something costs now compared to if this fine comes into place, what it actually will end up costing them in the long run.
Sean, as like an engineer, did you expect to kind of have a hand in communication, like such communication roles, and like maybe finance, like have the, you know, rapport of like finance and stuff when you graduated college?
I think that kind of goes along with energy, is like you're always going to have to, especially renewable energy, you're going to have to like argue for yourself and kind of stand up for yourself, like this makes financial sense. So I don't know that I saw it being a big role, but it's definitely an important one, and one that I'm happy to take, especially when it's like a positive impact where you're showing them that they can actually save like $500,000 in the long run or something like that. So yeah,
definitely. Yeah. And, you know, I think Massachusetts is like a really great example of like, you know, a shift towards renewable, and a lot of, you know, backbone within, you know, the state to incentivize that, or, you know, create fines to make sure that people are adhering to those guidelines. And Lucas, I know like working in Houston and in Texas, there's a little bit of a different, you know, viewpoint on these similar types of policies. So can you talk a little bit about what was like working for clients and what they were asking for, and what exactly they were looking for with working with ERM specifically?
Sure. So yeah, in Houston, a lot of my clients, maybe not surprisingly, were oil and gas. And on the air team, basically what we were doing was writing permits for them. Any projects that they want to do, any new wells they wanted to drill, they had to say, this is what we had to basically do it for them and say, these are what the emissions are going to be. And this is allowable under this policy here. So policy was kind of, it was everything basically, because they were basically trying to drill as much as they could up until the threshold of compliance. So a lot of my work was compliance based. And clients weren't so concerned about, you know, what their emissions were or anything like that. It was more, hey, this is what we want to do, make it happen. You know, what permits do we have to get? What hoops do we have to jump through? Things like that. So that was kind of the struggle I had, because I got in the space to kind of, you know, obviously be more green and help out. And I find myself kind of more on the behalf of the oil and gas companies at the time in Houston.
Yeah, I think that's like important to note that, you know, you could be on the Massachusetts side or you can be on the Houston side, maybe when you're, you know, finding yourselves in these places and these roles, and making sure that, you know, you understand when you're getting into a company or a role, kind of what the greater, you know, outlook on, you know, and the environment is, and how that is okay with you as like a person, and whether you want to be more on that front lines, or you want to be holding companies accountable to, you know, these environmental guidelines? Because I think both are really important. It just depends personally on what you're looking for and how you want to be fulfilled. So yeah, I think that's a really important perspective to have in this conversation, Lucas. So thanks so much. And I'd love to hear more if there's been any, Sean and Hannah, we saw just a, increase in solar initiatives in Massachusetts. Is there any other like increase in demand of certain types of like sustainability solutions from your clients that you're seeing, or any new trends that you're specifically like excited about coming up in your roles? Sean, do you maybe want to start here?
Yeah, I mean, the big push, I think, in buildings across like the entire country and the world is just electrifying everything, which has its own consequences, but that's kind of the way everyone's preparing now, is to electrify and then wait for the renewable energy to kind of catch up to like counter emissions, because it's a really exciting thing, but at the same time, like the grid in Massachusetts is like dirtier than using natural gas, like at this point. So if you electrify now, your current impacts are going to be not so great, but once like the renewable energy starts to kind of ramp up, then you're obviously going to have that payoff. So it's making that decision now of like kind of playing the waiting game.
Yeah. Lucas and Hannah, do you guys have any other thoughts of like trends that you're seeing, like either in school, Lucas, that conversations you have coming up that you're excited about, of different initiatives, or Hannah within your role? Whoever's ready to start can go first.
I'll go. So when I was in grad school, I studied microgrids for developing countries, and I focus on Puerto Rico and the Caribbean. So my company kind of brought me in to do microgrid work because they were seeing it really blow up in Massachusetts. My company's done a lot of energy storage projects in the past, but now we're seeing a lot more commercial energy storage projects, especially in Massachusetts. People are, with the SMART program, they're getting more incentives to get energy storage. So before, energy storage had no return except making your business more resilient during an outage, which we all know there's a lot to lose during power outages. Businesses lose money, and sometimes, especially in places like Puerto Rico, people lost their lives, and medicines that are in fridges and blah blah blah. So we're seeing a lot more, interest in energy storage. But like Sean said, with commercial building owners and developers, they have really, really tight investment criteria. So they want to return in like 3 years. Right now, we're seeing for energy storage about 5 to 7 years. But there are new programs coming out every day in Massachusetts that support energy storage more, because that energy storage supports the grid. And the state has realized that the more energy storage we have on the grid, the less we have to power up peaker plants, which are really costly to the utility. So they are incentivizing people to get more batteries. And so I think with the new programs that are coming out later this year, we're going to see closer to 3 to 5 year returns, and maybe closer to what Sean is talking about, where more building owners than are doing it now can get energy storage. It's a really exciting technology to be involved in right now.
Yeah, awesome. Lucas, do you have any other insights on any like exciting trends you're hearing about within school or anything like that?
Sure. So being out here in California, we're kind of at the state's kind of at the forefront of trying out these policies. So they have a goal to be 100% renewable by 2045, I think, maybe it's 2050. All new residential buildings have to be zero net energy. So that's creating kind of a ripple effect, and there's a lot of backlash to that. Besides that, my research is in stationary energy storage. So that's, I think, going to absolutely blow up. One of my research focuses is on using second life electric vehicle batteries to use in stationary energy storage. So that's kind of bridging the gap between electric vehicles are blowing up right now. They're going to, be, I think, at price parity with their internal combustion counterparts in like 5 years or something like that. So We're going to see a lot of batteries flooding the market. So energy storage technology is blowing up and prices are coming down. And that's a really exciting space, I would say, energy storage in general.
Got it. Cool. Great. Well, I think that I want to have a few, questions in here from the audience, because we're getting a lot just with wanting more insight on, qualifications and skill sets to, get into this field. But first, before that, I know that Hannah and Sean, you guys both mentioned just some modeling softwares that you guys are working on. A couple of people had questions on what that software was. And maybe if people need to have experience within those softwares to like enter into roles similar to yours.
I can. So for the one project we're doing, modeling the entire state of Massachusetts, doing the energy modeling for that. So we're using Energy Plus for that, which allows us to do the project a lot more straightforward than other energy modeling programs. And I had no experience with it at all. It was my second week. I went to a training and did 16 hours and then was thrown into the project. So it's something you can definitely learn pretty fast, and there's a lot of good resources out there. But for other energy modeling programs, we use IES is mainly what Arup uses, and yeah, I don't think there's any other programs that we use, but there are a bunch out there.
Got it. Hannah, what about you?
Yeah, so I also had no experience with software modeling before I got into my job. So I wouldn't worry about that very much, because your company most likely, at least in my experience, will teach you how to use things. And what we use is for solar designs, I primarily use Aurora Solar. You can design solar systems on there pretty easily. For battery systems, I usually just, make some homemade, good old homemade load calc spreadsheets myself. So it's not too complicated. We also use Energy Toolbase for financial modeling. So that's how I do all my financial analyses and demand response modeling. And then we use other companies to model the more complicated stuff.
Got it.
I'd also add, like, Excel is not like the sexy thing, and no one really wants to be like the best at Excel, but like knowing Excel pretty well is very helpful.
Yeah, that's super.
Yeah, I'd agree.
Yeah. Know everything about Excel, because I'm constantly tapping on our interns who are geniuses at Excel.
I think that was mentioned in one of our previous panels too. Someone was like, Excel is really important. So yeah.
It'll take so much time.
Yeah, so everybody definitely put fluent. I mean, obviously, if you are fluent in Excel, like put this on your resume, but make that a note in there. Great, awesome, guys. And so we had a bunch of questions though of people asking if there are any certifications or licenses that are needed to get into the consultancy field, or maybe if there are some that are helpful for getting into the field. Do you guys have any thoughts on that?
A lot of people in my work have like NABCEP certifications. There are several, like even sales consultants, you can get NABCEP certifications. My opinion is that, what you really need is diligence. That's a license in itself, kind of. And that, hard work will really get you anywhere. I know it sounds cheesy, but I just clawed at like everything to get to where I am, and it's I've never regretted it. I've worked really hard, and that's any employer will see that in an interview.
Great. Lucas or Sean, do you guys have any thoughts on this? I know that you guys both kind of got into the field right after college, so was there anything that was helpful in your interview processes for your roles?
For me as an engineer, I got my engineering and training certification. I think, I'm not sure how actually useful it is, but it doesn't hurt to have like 3 extra letters on your resume. If you're not an engineer, I think that's totally fine. I had to have some certifications for, it was called HAZWOP, or it's hazardous, basically dealing with hazardous materials during my remediation days. What I'll say is certifications often are not free, And so you should, I wouldn't worry too much about not having them coming out of college, and as much as you can get your companies to pay for you to get certified and things. Again, add some letters to your resume. It couldn't hurt.
Yeah, professional development, everybody. Usually a lot of companies have it, so it's just about pitching it to your supervisor and, you know, showing why it's worth, you know, investing in. Sean, did you have any thoughts though?
Yeah, no, I definitely echo that. I think that you don't need anything coming out of college. I didn't have it. The one for me that could have been helpful and kind of distinguishing me against other applicants is lead green associate. I didn't do that, but it's something that would definitely, if the job you're going to be doing involves lead at all, someone would see that and be like, oh, they're already familiar with the rating system. It'll be an easy transition for them. So I think that would definitely kind of help you pop, like help your resume.
Yeah. Great. Yeah, and I have a question from the audience that works in tandem with one of our questions as well. And you know, we're living in an evolving world and currently in a very unique time in our lives and histories with COVID happening. So I'd love to hear more about the impact of this time, maybe that you see on your work, and you know, whether you do see it impacting it long term, or and how your teams are, you know, innovating and adapting to this time right now. Sean, do you have any initial thoughts?
Little. So in terms of like the work, I know a lot of like industries have seen a downturn, but we really haven't seen that. So it's kind of it's an interesting time to get into it right now. Is there's a lot of people kind of projecting, like for construction specifically, like rates are going to drop. So people are getting into the design process more. So in that side of things, I don't see things changing too much. It is kind of an interesting time though to see like the emissions dropping, things like that, and seeing maybe if there are outcomes from this. Like the one positive thing that could come from this is like looking at the emissions and seeing the positives that came out of that, and maybe there are more projects that kind of prioritize emissions moving forward.
Hannah, any thoughts? Or
yeah, so through the years that I've worked at IPS, we've seen, you know, anytime a disaster happens, we've seen a big increase in the demand for resiliency. So solar and energy storage systems and microgrids and things like that. That certainly happened with, you know, hurricanes in Puerto Rico. We saw it a lot in Houston after Hurricane Harvey there. And we're seeing it a little bit now, a bigger increase in the demand for batteries. You know, some people think the world's ending, which isn't a good thing, but it does make you think about, you know, anytime something like this happens, how am I prepared for a disaster? I'm sure we all felt that way when there was no toilet paper. So a lot of people are thinking about it with their energy needs, and also taking advantage of what Sean mentioned, just really low interest rates, a lot of interest in that. So we are seeing a little bit of an uptick in Massachusetts in particular, where batteries pencil a little bit better.
Got it. Cool. And Lucas, you know, being in your graduate years, how have you been able to stay engaged with your work and classes in this time? And how are things feeling with like your fellow students on campus?
I would say my engagement is not as high as it was. It's pretty hard to be, as I'm sure everyone listening on the call who's in classes right now knows, it's hard to stay focused, I'll say, but I feel pretty fortunate right now to be in school. You know, a lot of people are losing their jobs and things like that. So I think I'm in a pretty fortunate place. With that being said, I went to a webinar the other day that basically talked about how we can turn this pandemic basically into an opportunity to kind of grow the economy towards a more green, sustainable space. And so I heard a lot of really exciting ideas basically about how there's going to need to be a stimulus of jobs after all of this, you know, comes out. There's a lot of people out of work, and how they can put that into kind of the green space and hopefully transition us. So there's a lot of advocacy out there for that, and hoping that turns out of this pandemic.
Yeah, I was just reading a article this morning about Milan having a plan to make their, like, I forget the percentage of city, like streets in the city more bike and walking friendly, and removing a lot of traffic from cars and vehicles. So that was one that was really cool to see them already integrating that structure for change after the economy opens up, specifically in Milan. So hopefully we can see that continue to happen throughout all of this, and staying positive and engaging webinars like this, where you can talk to peers about what they're doing, and staying motivated, I think, is really important, as we can hope that it doesn't last too much longer, but not to harp on COVID too long, because I know that's like probably every conversation everyone's having around home and everything, but Lucas, I want to go back to you for a little bit. I know that we touched on this earlier. You were in the consulting space and made the decision to move to out of that and go back to your graduate degree. Can you talk a little bit more about how you made that decision to make a career shift, and why going back to school seemed like the best option for you?
Sure. So I alluded to this earlier, but I after jumping position to position in the consulting world, I tried my hat on 3 different things, and just kind of took a second and looked around and said, I'm not really doing what I planned on doing, or what I was hoping I was doing. I didn't really see my impact in a positive way. I was definitely helping clients, with their bottom line, but I didn't really see the bigger picture. So it was a hard decision for me, but for me, I'm using school as kind of a pivot point to kind of take a pause and see what's out there, and kind of refocus my efforts to make sure that my career moving forward makes the sort of impact that I'm hoping to make.
Yeah, definitely.
So I'm using this time as kind of a pause almost.
Yeah, a pivot point. I like that. And I'm sure I was seeing some conversations happen in the chat bar of when to get into the consultant space, whether it was right out of college or coming with some experience, maybe graduate school, and you made the pivot out of it, but I think any of those thought processes can play into making a change in your career or how to engage a new industry. And Hannah, I know that you went to grad school as well. Do you feel like having a grad degree is something that is important to this field, or I know Sean came out right out of college, but are there anything else that we can give feedback for the audience to help them if they are interested in this field? I think that any skills or things that we can give them to inform how they enter into the space.
Yeah, so for me personally, I wasn't ready to work right out of college. I just didn't feel like I knew enough. Like I said, I majored in being a hippie, so I just didn't have any skill sets yet. I felt like I had some certifications listed on my resume, but I didn't feel like I had enough experiences to talk about in an interview, and enough, in-depth knowledge about the field I wanted to enter. So that's kind of why I chose to go to grad school. I also graduated high school early, so I was really young as well. So that was, just, I felt like I needed to learn more. So that's why I went to grad school, and kind of what I sought out in a grad school program was exactly what I got from the Green program, just a really interdisciplinary program, because I was scared to death of getting pigeonholed into one, just one kind of department. So the grad program I did, I took classes from every single, school within CU Boulder that I could, to make myself really well-rounded, and just chased it really hard and learned as much as I possibly could, so I could take that into the business world.
Yeah, and it seems like the consultancy space is most things are interdisciplinary once you got into the business world, but like we talked about before, you don't necessarily need to have one specific background to get into this space. So making sure that your background is diversified and showing your interest in a lot of different fields, and maybe a greater theme of, if it's the environment, and being really knowledgeable about it. But Sean, do you have any other feedback on anybody that's interested in becoming a consultant and ways that they can maybe level up their resume or interview skills to really help them, get into the space?
So I think about the interdisciplinary thing is really useful because you work with every discipline possible. And especially for like projects going for certifications, for me, I have to talk to like the construction team, mechanical, plumbing, civil, landscape, everyone. So you have to know a little bit about everything, which is something that I found really useful, was that I didn't know, there was nothing that I was so set on that I would go to grad school for it. So I actually kind of did the opposite, where I'm exploring while working. So getting paid to explore what I'm interested in.
Yeah, ideal.
Yeah. So yeah, I think that I worked on some projects in college that I got really into the interdisciplinary work, and was doing things that were so far from my knowledge base, that I think that was a really useful skill to kind of relay that to in an interview, to say that I was pushed out of my comfort zone and I learned from it, and I want to continue doing that and have the opportunity to do that in a job as well.
Yeah, definitely. So, what we talked about in the beginning of the session, and the theme of this week is, taking action for and mobilizing for the climate and for our world and the environment. And so we'd love for each, panelist to give, one action step that anyone listening can take after this event to, really mobilize for change for a more sustainable future. And I know that you gave your one step yesterday with the future of energy panel. So do you maybe want to start with your step? And then also anybody that's listening, if you have any, action step that you're taking, we'd love to hear, about what you're doing as well. But Hannah, go ahead.
Yeah. So I think, talking to your representatives, they're paid to listen to you. They're a lot more accessible than you think they are. Definitely go talk to them about, the ITC and other state, energy incentives or other sustainability incentives that are important to you. Working with your local community to figure out how to make renewable energy more affordable for disadvantaged communities in your area who need it most. Those are two things that are really important to me.
Great. Yeah. Awesome. Lucas and Sean, do you guys have any actions?
Sure. I would say think about things from a life cycle perspective. I think that's very important when you make your decisions as a consumer. A lot of people will make decisions thinking they're making the right move for the environment, but it might not be quite what they think it is. An example would be, as Sean alluded to, maybe, if you buy an electric car, for instance, plugging in your car, let's say in West Virginia, might actually be worse than putting gasoline in it or things like that, versus, if you have a more green grid. So think about things from a more life cycle perspective. Where is the energy coming from when you plug your, whatever in the wall? Where is it coming from when you fill up your car? Things like that.
Yeah. Sean, what about you?
So something I did was kind of take a look at myself and see what I was doing, because I felt good about the work that I was doing, but then there were certain things like the amount of food that I was wasting, things like that. And I felt like I wasn't doing enough there. So kind of taking a look at yourself and making sure that just because the work you're doing is good doesn't mean like you can let your life slide. So I did that and kind of had a clearer conscience moving forward. And even then going to organizations outside. So I've been to a few sunrise movement meetings, which is I felt good in everything I was doing, but I just wanted to see what was the next step that I could push myself to get a bit more involved and make a bigger change. So connecting with other like-minded people that are trying to make a change is a very powerful thing.
Definitely. Like what we're doing here. And I can see we have a ton of people chatting and hopefully giving their own action points as well. And yeah, I want to go into a few questions. We only have a few minutes left. I know we integrated a few throughout the session, but I did have, I think, one that came up twice that, whoever has insight can answer this. So what are the top renewable energy climate consultant companies and places to look for? And is working freelance or in an agency better?
I can go.
Great.
Yeah, so I think, I don't know how to define top, but I think you should, definitely do your research about a company and make sure that it's going to be a good fit for you. Something that's become really important to me that I didn't know was important was having a really awesome corporate culture. I really, I'm a very young woman, and probably the youngest at my company, but I'm still really listened to, which I really value. And then I also get a lot of access to my entire team, so I'm able to learn a lot. So that's been really important to me. And definitely, we aren't a large corporation by any means. We're a small family business. So I really like that. And we're probably not on well, we did make the top list on some lists, but we're probably not considered a top solar company in the world, because we're not as well known. But I definitely consider, ourselves, just in terms of what's important to me, a top company.
Yeah, definitely. And I think there's a difference between, like you said, the corporate culture can be very, different, especially small businesses, and then larger organizations have very different ways of functioning and different relationships that you have with your colleagues. So I think it's also important to think to yourself and what is important for you and what's the best learning environments for you, and ways that you are able to succeed and have your voice heard is also important when thinking about what top means. Yeah, Lucas and Sean, do you guys have any feedback on this question?
Yeah, I'd say kind of to that, it's finding what fits for you. So like Arup is a huge company. I think it's over 14,000 employees worldwide. But then that gives you the opportunity to connect. I've connected with people in Hong Kong and like the UK, Toronto, San Francisco, all over the place. So it's, I think, not necessarily like a ranking, like Hannah was saying, but if the values, and also just getting to know if you can get to know a few of the people and see like how do I fit in there, really changes your entire work life. If you like the people you work with and enjoy the projects, then it's a pretty awesome setup. So yes,
definitely. Lucas, do you have any thoughts?
Just to kind of echo that, you should definitely put a premium on company culture. If during your interview you could see yourself getting along with the people you're talking to, that will make your job a lot easier. As far as top goes, you could consider that being size, but there's a lot of different ways to think about things. And if you want a big consulting firm like ERM, for instance, you have probably a lot more. There's a lot of pros and cons to that. You probably have a lot more resources to work with, but also potentially a little bit less freedom in what you do. So, try to find a balance there, I guess.
Yeah, definitely. Well, so we're kind of coming up to the last we are coming to the last 2 minutes of the session. So I just want to, the last thing, just a shameless plug about just like learning more about how your guys' green program experience helped inform, how you got to where you are in your job, or just even your values around the environment. I'd love to hear, I know Lucas, you talked a little bit about this in your intro, but yeah, if you guys could talk a little bit more about how green impacted you in your life, that'd be great. Sean, do you have any first thoughts?
Yeah, so I can't there's not one particular moment that I can pin down, but it was just the entire thing of, again, getting around people who were all there for the same reason, and you're all very compassionate and want to make the earth a better place, and you're going through this amazing experience in Iceland, just beautiful scenery, and then really connecting with people at the same time as doing a project together where you get to voice different things that you've learned or that you're passionate about, and you get to learn that through other people. So just, having an opportunity to connect with people that you otherwise never would have met, likely. It was a very, very powerful experience.
Awesome. Great. Hannah, do you have any insight?
Yeah, I kind of had the same experience being from Texas. There weren't a lot of like-minded people that I knew. So that was really my first exposure to being around people who all cared about the same things as me. It also just came at a really important time in my life where it just gave me a total, global worldview versus the small town I grew up in. So it was really important for my growth and also just understanding who I was. As a lot of you know, travel can really just do that to you on a very spiritual level. So it was really important there. It also taught me that I liked renewable energy. So that's just one example of how those kinds of experiences can teach you, what you enjoy and give you some personal growth.
Yeah. Great. Lucas, do you want to maybe just repeat what you said in the beginning in case some of those people missed what you said?
Sure. Yeah. I'd say my experiences on the green program as a whole have kind of anchored me and made sure that I don't drift too far away to my goals of staying green and sustainable and things like that. Being around, as Sean said, people who are like-minded has really helped kind of refocus my career at times where I may be kind of drifting away. So it's been, again, sort of like an anchor to me to that kind of center point that I want to stay at. So it's been really useful for me and helpful.
Great. Yeah. And it was so good to connect with you all again here and the rest of the alumni from, all these panels. It's been really inspiring to hear where you guys have all gone and are continuing to make impact after your programs and to come back and provide your insight and such valuable information and knowledge to, a whole other community is, really amazing. So applause to you guys for taking your time to do this with us today. And we really appreciate it. Anybody that's listening, we have a few other sessions going on later this afternoon at 3, and then another session tomorrow. So please, feel free to join us for a few more panels this week. And if you're interested in the green program, we are currently recruiting for more sustainability leaders for our winter programs, and have options, to address, what travel looks like in this world that we're living in today. So our team is, totally open to have conversations with you and learn more about how you guys can all make impact and, develop yourselves as global citizens and sustainability leaders. So we hope to talk to you in, further. But again, Lucas, Hannah, and Sean, thanks so much for joining us today. And, we'll see you guys soon, hopefully. But everyone have a good day. And yeah.